Now for the second panel session, Food and Farming, your panel I present.
I guess I should talk about how this whole thing started. Through a conversation with Dean Wynne and Dr. Chamberlain, they asked me what I would want to do for a sequence of classes. It needed to be 3 credits in the fall and 6 credits in the winter. And I went, I want it to be on food. I want to take the Food Inc. approach in the fall, and then I want to go and look at Jamie Aller's Food Revolution, and then dive and really look at all aspects of our food system, from where it comes from, to why we eat what we eat, to the consequences of the excess. Looking at it locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, and economically, environmentally, and socially. So it's a huge class. Unfortunately, there are only 4 weeks left, and we think we barely scratched the surface. But that's how I get to spend my day, and that's why I'm here.
So I grew up on a family farm in rural Kentucky. And when my girlfriends at 16 and 17 were laying by the pool with their Crisco oil, and their aluminum foil, I was driving a tractor, working in tobacco fields with my siblings, and participating in the family farm. And I couldn't get away from there fast enough. You can imagine a 17 or 18-year-old, that's not really an attractive lifestyle. I thought I was much more cosmopolitan, and it turns out I'm not. But I spent my 20s and some of my 30s finding myself, but it took me actually back to my roots. I found the intellectual side of food systems. Now, I was trained as a rural sociologist. I'm a faculty member at MSU. We just called food systems agriculture in the day. But now that it's become hot and pollen and everyone's talking about it, it's British Vogue calls it the new sex, by the way. It is exploding, and we think of it as a food system. And the complexity of the food system, the way in which humans organize their food, how they negotiate, how they assign meaning to food and agriculture, how they come into conflict with one another and duke it out. Who wins, who loses, what are the trade-offs? Those are the things that motivate me, and I spend my time thinking about. So I'm going to share some of those ideas with you today.
In 2006, I started Groundswell Community Farm with a friend of mine, Anna Hoekstra, and 2 women starting up a farm in a very conservative rural area was a bit of a scandal, but we got past that, and we were fortunate in that we both had a lot of farming experience, so we knew what to do in the field. It was a challenge, certainly. There's a lot of male-oriented skills that we went into farming without. So construction, mechanical skills, we had trouble with plumbing and electrical, but you can just kind of go to the hardware store and they want to sell you things and tell you how to do it. So we got past those challenges. Now we are selling to 150 CSA members, both in Grand Rapids and in Holland. And we're also selling at the Fulton Street Farmers Market on Saturdays. We're really lucky to have a market with so much community support. There's a, I don't know if you've all seen it, but there's about $2 million going into the Fulton Street Farmers Market this year to make it a permanent structure, so I don't have to put up tarps every week. We also sell at Harvest Health, all 3 locations, which has been really nice. We drive our produce 5 miles, which we couldn't go to a successful farmer's market in Hudsonville, but fortunately we can sell to a retail location that's that close, and they just put it on their trucks that are going from store to store anyway. So that's probably a really low carbon footprint way of getting food.
If you think about it, I want you guys to take a minute and think about when you used to go shopping when you were little with your folks. You rode where? In the grocery cart, right? Right up by your mom or your dad, and they could talk to you and interact with you. And you could see why they were buying what they were buying. And your mom could tell you the best way to pick a pineapple. And maybe if you were like me, your mom actually put it too close to her face and stabbed herself, and there was blood all over it. It was very funny. But now think about the last time you went to your local grocery store, Meijer or Family Fare. Think about how the carts have been redesigned. Where are the kids sitting now? Have you guys noticed? The little cars, they're down in front, and you can pay money and they can watch a video. So you don't have to interact with your kids. And what do they learn? while they're at the grocery store? Do they learn anything about food? We are getting increasingly removed from our food systems. Last semester, I decided on a simple project for my class. They didn't know what it was. The first 2 weeks of class, they had to keep a food diary. And then after the second week, I said, all right, guys, this is your final project. You have to pick one of the meals, and you have to trace all the ingredients back to the virgin state. Simple? Straightforward? Not even close. Simple things they thought they had that they could trace back. There were hundreds of ingredients. No one in my class will ever buy Tyson again because Tyson was mean when they called them and tried to get information. Now they're on an anti-high fructose corn syrup thing, and they're watching a movie tomorrow, and some of them are going to try to be vegans until the end of the semester. But the more removed we get from our food systems, the more problems we have. I started being aware of needing to watch what I ate when I was in college because I had kidney stones 3 times. And my mom put me on what I still refer to as a witch doctor diet. And I had to give up a bunch of things. I had to give up red meat and caffeine and chocolate and all these other things. Well, over the years, I sort of ignored my mother because, you know, your mom is only smart for so long in your life, right? And lo and behold, last semester, I was back in the hospital, had kidney stones again. So now I've got to apologize to my mother for ignoring her. But if we don't pay attention to what goes in our food systems, then we don't pay attention to what goes in our bodies and what goes in our children's bodies and what goes in our rivers and lakes and air and what's happening to our soils. If we don't pay attention and we don't demand to know, then we have no control. And then we have no one to blame.
My answer to this question simply is, well, it's a lot of things. It's not simple or neat. There's no one quick and dirty answer. Particularly if we think about a sustainable food system and women's role in producing a sustainable food system, because it's been quite a mixed bag. Women have helped considerably and are helping considerably to advance a sustainable food system, yet also many women and their work get in the way and obstruct. And I particularly put myself in this camp because I'm going to ask you today, as I do, and I fail at this miserably many times. Sometimes I do okay, but often I fail at being a very mindful, reflexive consumer and food citizen. What does it mean to be a food citizen? And I want to talk just a minute about women's historical role. To understand women's role in agriculture, you have to think of these social markers and where we're socially located. When I ask my students, what do you think women's roles are in the food system, they would say, they're cooks, right? This is the way they first know their mother, as providing nourishment, right? Mothers provide nourishment, particularly not only for themselves, they often neglect themselves, but they're concerned about family, their children, others, often before themselves. In the process of producing food, however, preparing food, cooking, we're also creating and perpetuating traditions. But I have to remember that when I have the luxury of removing myself from my food provisioning needs, I'm passing that on to another woman, because restaurants, processing plants, grocery stores are disproportionately staffed by women who don't make the same salary that I make, who make barely a living wage. So I want to say something that's perhaps more promising, because if we look around at the opportunities, women are reclaiming food in ways Kirsten just talked about, but other ways as far as not only consumption but production. The face of agriculture is more likely to be Katie. It's not that old white guy in overalls who's 60.
We grow organic vegetables. We have about 35 different crops, and of those we grow about 300 different varieties, so very diverse.
So any beef or
No, we're actually in a floodplain, so introducing manure into that mix would be a poor choice. Well, I'm lucky to be in the position to really talk about the positive aspects of what's going on in our food system today. And I think that this starts it certainly starts with everyone in this audience. You can participate in many ways. Probably the most positive thing you can do is start growing in your own backyard, start canning in your own kitchen and cooking more of your own meals from scratch, certainly, and we don't all have time for that. So picking and choosing where we can fit into that is really an opportunity that we all have for participating in this system. One thing that I'm going to focus on, and one thing that is really an opportunity in the food system right now, certainly is getting involved in agriculture as a grower, as a farmer. What we see in hiring each year is that we almost never have the opportunity to hire any males. It's all women that contact us looking for work. One thing I have seen, though, in hiring guys in the past is they're very likely to work at a farm one year and be totally ready to just go out and start their own farm. And so I think 14% of farmers, as you said, in Michigan are female, but of the farm workers on these organic farms, it's totally flipped.
You know, it's interesting because we're talking about women and what women do and how they're becoming more active. If we're not active, we put ourselves in the great role of being a victim to society and what society says we need to be. We all know we need to be 6'2", have long blonde hair, blue eyes, and be a size, -2. And we're supposed to eat accordingly. And unless we start paying attention to the women up here with me and the messages that they send, and really not listening to the messages that bombard us every day. Do you guys remember those healthy potato chips? You could have these wonderful potato chips and they could help you lose weight. You know why? There were no potatoes in them. They were made out of polyurethane. You were literally eating styrofoam.
Yeah, I'll be the poster child for bad eating today because I was honest enough to admit it. But don't let me, I am sure there's a few lean cuisines in your freezer here. Diet Coke, we all have our guilty, life is complicated. Yes. Why do we want to eat differently? Why is Katie so popular that she can't serve all of this demand? It's because we have moved to a new stage in our development, what we call post-industrial. It doesn't really matter what we call it, but what comes with that is a bit of existential crisis. Who are we? What are we doing? Where's meaning in our lives? We spend 60 hours a week working, and we go through the drive-through. We don't have the connections with our children, our significant others. We are frazzled, and so we start to look other ways. And many of the ways people are looking are toward the local. It's not just clearly about local food. It's about local clothing, local housing, cooperative. Basically what this tells us is we're looking for relationships. We want to bond with people. A CSA is meaningful because I get to know my farmer.
I think that a lot of our foods are filled with subsidies. So if you're buying things that are corn-based and soy-based, you're not paying the full monetary cost. Of course, also you're not paying the full environmental cost. One of the big differences for us in farming organically is we can't use the herbicides. So that means that we either have to pay someone to pluck those weeds by hand or hoe them or go through with a tractor and cultivate them. So there are definite cost differences when you make those choices. As far as pest problems, we're in a pretty rich soil and don't have a ton of problems with that. Maybe there's a few labor costs with putting on, we use these row covers that just keep the insects from getting to the plant instead of spraying something that would kill the insect.
Really, it was interesting and frightening a bit to me when some people went, "What? You can make pasta?" So they've already shown a little bit of disconnection with their food system, but they're working really hard. And one thing they're trying to do right now is they want to be able to use their debit dollars for their meal plans to be able to shop at the farmer's market. They want to be able to buy local, fresh produce. They are all about talking to campus dining and trying to make an impact. They want to make a difference. They want to start their own food revolution.
One of the latest books on the market is What to Eat. Mary Nessel, maybe you've heard of it. A lot of people are really making a lot of money on shaming you, inciting fear, telling you what's wrong with our food system. And I'm not saying they're all wrong. A lot of this is research that's been going on for decades that is just being popularized in the media these days. The fight that I'm interested in is how will it turn out? Will it be driven by those voices in the media, the Michael Pollan talking heads that are going to tell you how to eat? And I don't want to bash Michael Pollan. I shouldn't have said it that way. He has a lot of good things to say. He can write amazingly. I'm very envious. But I'm interested in it, how we'll cultivate those democratic voices, how people in Grand Rapids, for example, maybe some of you, will create your own food system. Will this food system be driven by industrial elites like the industrial food system has been over the past 50 to 75 years? Will it be driven by subsidies and state policy? Will it be driven by the cultural talking heads like Pollan, Marion Nessel, Eric Schlosser, the list goes on and on? Or will it be driven by citizens who are eating food, doing the work of maintaining their communities, their families, and of course, most concerned about living the trade-offs, the experience, the negative impacts of environmental toxins, health problems, and those sorts of things?
I guess just how far removed we are from knowing what it is and what goes into what we put in our bodies. And I know I teased you a little bit about lean cuisine. I'm not saying that I don't have certain things in my kitchen that, okay, Andrea, you're not allowed to come over and see. But just how it's so hard. I felt really bad for my students last semester when they couldn't find out where their food came from. They kept just hitting brick walls. A couple of them were lucky enough to have some locally sourced stuff so they could actually go talk to the farmers. But most of them they just couldn't figure it out. They couldn't find out where things were coming from. They were really tired that everything they ate had corn in it. So it's not as straightforward as it should be. And we've come a long way from the days when my grandma taught me how to make bread in the kitchen. We don't do that anymore.
Not participating in a world food system which makes it easy for corporations and other large agricultural interests to control the land that may be productive for smallholders, for small farmers, if they had access to it. Now, certainly in a lot of third world areas, the low income, low food access folks that we're talking about may not even really be interested in a rural lifestyle where they're growing up their own. But for those who are, we need to make that a possibility.
I would agree, and I would say one of the things that is part of the great myth that we tell ourselves is that we feed the world. We have plenty of food to feed the world. We sell food to the world. Who can buy it?
I'm going to start with a quote from one of my favorite people, Ellen DeGeneres. She was talking about an all-you-can-eat buffet. Who really needs all they can eat? We throw away enough food to solve world hunger. There's enough food that ends up in landfill to solve the problem. Now, I am not saying that we should go and we should truck our garbage and our I love the way you said the stuff composting in your refrigerator. That was brilliant. And send that off. But if we didn't overproduce, then that land could be freed up to produce things for the people in the areas that need it.
There is a myth, however, and part of this has to do with the popularity and the speed in which the local food movement is taking place in this country. We assume all local is good. We assume organic is sustainable, and sustainable is good. That's not the case because, as Katie mentioned, not only here in Michigan, which I guess she was referring to, around the world, the women, the workers doing the work of organic are women. They're often being recruited from countries because they're women, because employers know that they're desperate to take care of their families. Often they're particularly targeting single women. There's a migratory stream from Mexico to Canada that particularly targets single mothers. because they know when they're finished with their work, they'll go home because they're tied to their children. They only want them for their labor, and they pay them, of course, not living wages. If you're concerned only with your body, eat organic food. If you're concerned with your community and the oppression of women, you have to take those things into consideration.
I'm sure that Harvest Health would love me to plug their stores right now, so I'll do that. We have sold a little bit to restaurants, but it's been really hit and miss. That's not a real focus of our farm, although other farms have done that really successfully with quite a few local restaurants. One great source for local food is www.localharvest.org. I also brought a stack of West Michigan Fresh local food guides that are for Kent County and all of the adjacent counties, and that was done in 2011, so it's really current information as well. You can find an ever-updated list for the West Michigan Fresh Guide at foodshed.net. And also just visiting farmers markets and talking to people. If there's something you don't see that you want to find, it may be possible just through talking to the farmers to find what you're looking for.
And I would say, shoot for the moon. Ask the questions you want to ask and talk to the people you want to talk to. My students right now, their final project is they're researching for a film. And Andrea Mars, actually, who is in the audience today, was instrumental in getting one of the producers of Dive to come to campus. And then we harassed him. He came to my class, and my students said, we want to research for your film. You're making a film on GMOs. We want to research for it. And that's what they're doing. So ask the questions. Don't be intimidated by anyone's title or who they may appear to be. Everyone is a person.
There's a school of thought that says we have the food system we deserve. We have the food system we ask for. And I guess to follow up on both of these comments, it's required of us as responsible food citizens to demand the kind of food that you want. To ask those questions. Industry will give you what they can give you because they can. And if you ask them, demand, of course you can't just ask nicely, it will be a bloody fight, but this is part of the food fight. You have to demand the food system that you think you deserve.